Dogman of the Sea. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story for you about a beast that my sister Nettie obsessed over. It strongly resembled what you talk about on this channel as a dogman. I only ever heard her refer to it as the beast, as she seemed to have a Beauty and the Beast fixation with it. I don't mean to imply anything vulgar by that. My sister was an admirer of animals in such a way that she would become friends with them. When an animal wasn't friendly toward my sister, it meant something was wrong with the animal 100% of the time. It was the same with humans. All healthy creatures were naturally drawn to my older sister, as she was sort of the golden girl of our lives. Nobody outside of our family knew of her friendship with the dogman as far as I'm aware. It was a dangerous kind of a friendship to attempt. But even our parents knew better than to try to talk Nettie out of something. As long as she did her chores, she was pretty much on her own, making her own decisions. I thought my parents supported her associating with that werewolf man, until one day when I told them that I did not. They responded blandly that they felt the same way I did. Then, they went back to their jigsaw puzzle. I had been so emotional about it that their casual acceptance of Nettie placing herself in danger took me by surprise. When I pressed them about it, they told me it was their job to raise us to make our own decisions, not to raise us to be their slaves. I said that if Nettie was allowed to decide to hang around dangerous beasts, then I should at least be allowed to drink beer. They told me I made no sense and that there was no such thing as a werewolf, but I felt the same way about them. They were making no sense to me. We lived in a house on a high cliff overlooking a rocky water's edge far below, sort of like in Wuthering Heights, or Dark Shadows, which Nettie watched too much of. She had a romantic attraction to the cliff's edge, and would wander out there at night, when we all thought she was in bed. We had a staircase to go down to the beach safely, yet she insisted on watching the surf hit the rocks and sand from the edge of the cliff, dangerously far above. When she told us that she had a friend, the beast, who came out of the sea, we all began to privately discuss what kind of a shrink she might need. This was the late 1960s, and even for people in our social class who could afford it, psychiatry was still not quite as ubiquitous as it might be today. We were worried about Nettie. We didn't know if she was losing her sanity. After our parents got her set up with her own therapist, the therapist urged us to listen to Nettie and encourage her to tell us her strange stories. If we all compared notes, the therapist thought, we could all keep ourselves appraised of how the poor kid was doing. So that was how I first learned that my sister's friend from the sea, the beast, was supposedly a man who was also a dog. When I told my parents that, they gave me a new daily chore to monitor my sister and to go with her when she walked out to the cliff's edge to speak with her imaginary friends. Their hope was that if I were there with her, it might bring her back to reality. What I mean to say is, it might bring her back to the same reality that the rest of us lived in. What ended up happening, though, was kind of the opposite of that. I set up some mirrors in my room in the hallway so that I could see my sister's door peripherally. I would be able to see when it opened, and I would be able to join her wherever she roamed in the night. That was assuming she didn't mind her younger brother tagging along. If she forbade it, then I was under instructions to tail her surreptitiously. Luckily, it didn't come to that, as she really didn't seem to care whether I was there or not. We both left the house quietly. She did it in hopes of not alerting my parents to her going out. I did it because I was pretending I was conspiring with her, while actually doing the bidding of my parents. We walked way out to the ledge, and Nettie got closer than I was willing to go. She teased me that I wasn't very brave for a boy, and so I drew closer to the edge. My sister was crazy. I now had no doubt of it. The wind was too strong for us to be that close to oblivion, and I told her so. I insisted we move back from the edge, but Nettie said that was the only place we'd be able to see her friend from when he swam up to the land. The look in her eyes was batty, and I felt like running inside and telling my parents that she was not savable. I was still pretty religious in those days, and when some thunder rolled off in the distance, I took it as the Almighty warning me not to consider abandoning my only sister. I just prayed that she didn't drag me over the edge with her. I was wishing I was back in my warm, dry bed when Nettie let out a squeal, the kind of sound that girls in those days made when they saw Davy Jones or Jonathan Frid on the boob tube. She was acting like she was seeing a movie star or a teen idol, so I looked down where she was looking, and I saw my first monster of my life. It was a big, dark, hairy blob coming out of the water in the moonlight. But then suddenly, it looked up at us. 2 glowing eyes and 2 rows of prehistoric-looking choppers, long enough to chew through anything. I was way above it, far out of its reach, but my heart began thumping like I was about to meet my maker. From the first moment that thing laid eyes on me. It was like a werewolf from the movies, but much taller, and it had a greenish tinge to its fur. Was it an amphibian mammal? What kind of animal was it? And what was wrong with Nettie that she would want this monster creature in her life anyway? In that moment, I realized that Nettie had been telling the truth about what she'd been seeing and doing, and yet somehow, that did not make her seem sane. It made the entire situation feel a lot more insane, as far as I could see. Still, it was kind of a shock that any of this was happening. This was not what my parents had told me would happen. I was supposed to be convincing Nettie that none of this was real, but I wasn't sure how I could do that when we were staring at the Dogman, and he was staring right back at us. Whether he was real or not, he was right down there looking at us. If it can give you the eye, it's probably something that's actually there. I climbed, panicked, up to more level ground, and I pulled my sister back up there with me. I never had superior strength to her before, but it seemed that I was finally old enough that she didn't really even resist me very much. I think she must have known she was going off the deep end a bit, and soon we both might be tipping off the cliff if she didn't help a guy out. So we went back to the house, and I put her in her room. She was acting kind of dazed. I was wondering what her deal was. Sneaking into my parents' room to update them, they told me to lock her in for the evening and to sleep in my sleeping bag outside her door. It didn't actually come to that, as Nettie invited me in and told me to use her guest bed that she had for when her friend would sleep over. She knew what was up by then, so I tried to get some sleep, but my sister kept me up, telling me about her friend, the dog-headed man. She told me that he swam under the water, and he walked the land, since he could breathe both in air and in water. According to Nettie, the Dogman lived out in the middle of Lake Michigan, an idea that would have made me laugh only a day earlier. After my brief sighting of that creature, I wasn't sure I would ever laugh again. Nettie claimed that if she didn't go see the Dogman, that he would come to see her. Between her creepy conversation about that hairy water monster and the loud thunder and flashes of lightning, I was kind of rattled. I don't think I was more than 14 or 15 at the time, and this was still the late 60s, when werewolves were not supposed to be real. I mean, I'd seen the werewolf on Nettie's favorite show Dark Shadows, and it was not in the same league of scariness as that thing downstairs. There were no movie or TV monsters that looked anything like what was swimming around out there. This was more frightening than any mummy, or Frankenstein, or vampire that they used to show us in those days. This was an intensely traumatizing thing to see, and I was having a bit of trouble holding it together. I wanted to pull the covers over my head and wish it all away, but I knew my parents were counting on me to be a man. Bam! The Dogman leaped from somewhere below to the ledge outside Nettie's window, slamming hard into the window glass, but not breaking it. I looked at the window and could see the silhouette of the monster right outside. It clearly wanted to be let in, and knowing my lunatic sister, she was probably going to do just that. Forgetting that this was supposed to be a test of my early manhood, I screamed like an infant, and I fell over backward into my sister's door. It hurt a lot, but did not slow down my escape into the hallway. Once there, I screamed so high and so loud that I can't believe the windows didn't all crack apart. I remember my father running past me into my sister's room, and I remember my mother squeezing me and asking if I was okay. I tried to tell her about the Dogman, but my words weren't going together correctly. Soon I was blubbering all over the place, and my father was grouching at me that I was a disappointment who couldn't get the simplest job done right. He stayed just as encouraging toward me for the rest of his life, too. I was not his favorite son, to be certain. Unfortunately, I was his only son, so whatever. My sister was acting innocent, my father was overreacting, and the Dogman was gone. My sister was made to go sleep in my parents' room so they could protect her themselves, and I was sent to bed after catching some more abuse and criticism from my dad. I should have been happy to be relieved of duty, but I felt guilty, like I'd let the whole family down instead. I was so annoyed at the Dogman. He was ruining things for my entire family. The next day I was a wreck from lack of sleep, but that didn't mean I didn't take more criticism from my parents for having let them and my sister down the night before. Nettie actually defended me, but that only brought their wrath down on her next. My father announced that we were not spending another night in that house. Nettie immediately began weeping and protesting, but our parents had already booked us into a hotel in town for that night and told us we'd find more permanent lodgings in time. There was to be no discussion. There was to be no more wandering out to the cliff's edge at midnight. And most of all, there was to be no more Dogman. We were told what to pack and how long we had to do it, and there was no more time for tears. I loved the hotel, even though it was kind of sleazy. I'd only been in a hotel once before, so it was something new. I guess this was a motel, technically, as there was only one floor to it, built around the edges of a parking lot. Our room had a window onto the parking lot in the front, and a window onto the woods and unofficial garbage dump behind the place in the back. I claimed the bed by that window, a decision I would live to regret. Later that evening, I fell asleep by the open window, the lovely odor of garbage wafting in every so often. Still, it smelled better than the room itself, so Nettie didn't complain. After I fell asleep, I was awakened by something causing pain around my midsection. Opening my eyes, I saw a huge, long, muscular, and fur-covered, yet humanoid arm reaching through the window, and the immense clawed hand at the end of that arm was holding me around the belt area, tight, squeezing a bit more each second. It felt like I was a toothpaste tube being squashed in the middle. I could imagine toothpaste bursting out of my head and feet simultaneously. I tried to scream, and succeeded in making a weird and awful sound. Nettie woke up and came over to the window, talking soothingly with the hideous monster out there, who was in the process of brutally murdering her brother. The beast loosened his grip on me, and as brutally as he had held me, that was how gently he lifted my sister up and out of that motel window. It reminded me of the scene in King Kong where he carries Fay Ray out of her room in his giant hand. While this creature was no King Kong, he was much larger than either me or my sister, or my parents for that matter. I wanted to follow, but I was in a lot of pain. I crawled out to my parents' room and collapsed. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, where I was informed that I had internal bleeding from the injuries around my waist. The doctor wanted to know what happened, but when I told him it was a werewolf who reached through the motel window, he kind of scowled at me. When the police asked me where my sister was, and I told them that the same werewolf who had injured me had taken my sister away, well, they scowled at me too. My dad was arrested and held without bail on suspicion of something, I'm not sure what. Suspicion of being the Dogman, maybe. Actually, the law didn't believe in the Dogman any more than the doctors had, so I can't tell you what they were thinking. So when my sister turned up alive and wandered home, the police dragged her right in and questioned her for hours. Supposedly she just kept telling them the truth. She had been asked to go out and play with her werewolf friend. Her story matched mine exactly, but that didn't mean anyone believed either one of us. At least my father got released, but it took a while before we were able to move away from that location. And Nettie kept right on seeing that Dogman, against everybody's wishes, including mine. No, he wasn't her boyfriend. He was just her friend. Please don't even suggest stuff like that to me. This creature had a wolf-like head, but massive pectoral muscles, like a man. His shoulders were wide, like a bodybuilder, but his legs were shaped more like the rear legs of a dog than anything human. His eyes glowed as though he were some kind of demon from hell. His paws were more like hands, and everything about him seemed evil and wrong. I used to laugh at the idea of pure evil, but I don't any longer. I saw how easily my sister accepted his obvious bad vibes, and I couldn't understand why she was so comfortable with him. Like I said before, his gray fur was tinged green, and I believe he really must have spent much of his time in the water. My sister told me that he lived almost all the time underwater. However, she never told me how exactly she knew that. I began to suspect that she had visited his world herself, and I wondered how she had breathed, if she had really gone underwater. I never did find out. When my sister turned 21 the next month, she ran off with one of her girlfriends. And that was almost the last time any of us ever heard from her. We heard of her from other people who she would come into contact with and stay over with, but she never came home again. I haven't personally heard anything about her since Christmas time in 1981, when a friend told me that she said to say happy holidays to me. So I know she was still alive and still talking to other humans at that point. It's been over 40 years since then, and I still wonder if she's alive somewhere, or if she's been gone for decades. Is she still walking the surface of the planet, or is she buried 6 feet under it? Or is it possible that my sister might really have gone off to somehow, in some way, live under the water with Dogman of the sea? Whenever we reach a bad point, whenever we can't make a guess, when everyone's nose is out of joint, we seem to get saved by CS. Please join us in thanking CS, who made a big donation to us just before I got sick the other day. I used that donation to buy comfort food, Junior's cheesecake from Brooklyn. Thank you, CS. We still have half of it left if you want some. Ninja the cat likes it too, so he also says thank you. I had promised that I would create some new ways for you to donate and some new merch, but then I went ahead and got a bad head cold that I hope I'm starting to get over now. Apologies to all of you for me dragging my feet. I hope I get caught up very soon. I don't know what we'd do without kind donors like CS. If you'd like to help us stay online with new shows, please check out what our pal Henry has to say next. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.